All right. Welcome back, everybody. As everybody in the room finds their seats, for the folks on Zoom, this is just a reminder to keep your microphones muted as you are meeting, just to avoid any unnecessary background noise, things like that. If you have questions, once again, those can go in the chat.
How many total times?
And for the folks in the room, this is just a reminder that if it's possible to wait for a microphone before asking your question, that helps the folks on Zoom to be able to hear you a little bit better. And yeah, now I will turn it over to the coordinator for today.
Hello, welcome to day 2 of History's Mysteries as Told Through American Flags, 1770 to 1960. I can't believe I said that all at once. If you were here yesterday, you know what a delightful thing this has been. I mean, I'm just surprised myself. I had so much fun. Robert Williamson is our presenter. He is the founder and director of the House of Flags Museum in North Carolina, Columbus, North Carolina, not Ohio, not. But I do have to ask a question. It is the only flag museum in the country. Is that correct?
It's the only House Flag Museum in America.
In America. Okay, so we have quite an honor having him here. So Robert is a Michigander by birth. He went to Ferris and University of Michigan, where he got degrees in teaching and vocational administration. He's worked in industry doing consulting with global manufacturers, and he's taught at universities, University of Dayton and Northwest Michigan College. So he's got a very wide background, and he's delving into this stuff like crazy. I want to say one thing about questions. I felt like a total failure yesterday running around trying to get people to use the microphone. And I know what a difficult thing it is when you're spontaneously trying to ask questions. It really cuts into the fun of it if you have to wait. So I'm going to ask this. Raise your hand if you know a question, and I would sit standing back there and try to get to you. If I don't, Robert has been so good about repeating questions that I will ask that he do that again, and then hopefully we'll get through this class. So I think that's all I have to
So
talk
we'll
about.
try.
Yeah, we'll try.
So how many new people today? Okay, so we'll have additional handouts for you shortly. I left them at home, so my wife and sister-in-law went to fetch them, so they'll be here. Well, at your home. Yeah, I'm sorry. They're not going to North Carolina to get the handouts yet. So my brother and sister-in-law make their home like our home when we visit, and we're so thankful to be in Holland, Michigan. Our roots are on the other side of the state, Tecumseh, which is another small town. So anyway, we have more handouts coming. So the House of Flags Museum, just a reminder to the folks from yesterday and the new folks today, we opened on September 8th, 2001 in an old building, 13 miles from town, no heat, no air, no plumbing, no restroom, flags and lots of bugs. So we've repurposed the old town fire hall into a museum. We lease it from the county for $1 a year. We have a renewable 30-year lease, and we're probably 12, 13, 14 years into that lease. That's the grand opening. The grand opening was at 11 a.m. on the 11th month at the 11th hour of 2011. So that's Veterans Day. 11/11/11/11. So we had about 350 people close down the street in front of the building, had speakers from different ranks in the military and different Revolutionary War reenactors there, and the high school band played, and we had a grand time. So that's a little bit about the only House of Flags Museum in America. So what I'm going to cover today is two eras, the Revolutionary War era, which is my favorite, because the flags told story of the society, told stories about what people were interested in, told stories about what's important to us, told stories about the transition from the tyrannical King George III in Parliament to our own country and our own leadership. So as we look at the flags, your handout sheets, and again, the other ones will be here. I pictured each of the flags with the basic information on them. And then you can make notes. For those of you who don't have a handout in front of you, I will meet with you afterwards to help you fill in some of the blanks. We have more coming. Yeah. So this flag is probably one of the more important flags from the Revolution. This dates to about 1774. It's the Philadelphia Light Horse, and this was the local cavalry in Philadelphia. It was a city-sponsored cavalry. What's most interesting about this flag, and the vexillologists, the flag geeks, discovered the original one of these that's hanging in the museum in Philadelphia. These stripes are painted over a British Union Jack. So it's been repurposed in that their transition from a British colony to being upset with the British to now we're 13 colonies, created this little painted on modification to the flag. But this flag, this cavalry group, the Philadelphia Light Horse, also known as the First Troop, escorted George Washington, the commander-in-chief, when the Congress met in Philadelphia. They were the official escort and the bodyguards of our first commander-in-chief. So the unit still exists today. So there's some interesting things about this flag that I'll get to as we go through this on other flags. But here's sort of the coat of arms of the Philadelphia Light Horse. And over here is an American Indian, Native American Indian, with a stick and a hat on the end of the stick. Here's an angel with a trumpet. And here's the horse for the cavalry, of course. And the words say, "For these we strive. For these we strive." So we're striving for a blend of things. As a new nation, as the colonial Americans, we're striving for something that wasn't necessarily common in our homeland. And again, I'll unpeel that onion as we go through the next few flags here, what they're striving for. So Philadelphia Light Horse, question? We'll get there. So my coach here is pointing out that the hat, tell about the hat. Yes, we'll get to the hat. So the hat comes in this. You're good. So the hat. So this is from the Battle of White Plains, New York. And in this battle, the Patriots were defeated by the Hessian mercenaries, and the flag was captured, but then it was recaptured later on and returned back to the Patriots. But when I first saw this flag, the sentiment, I mean, they were fighting for liberty, not only, freedom from a king in parliament, but freedom to do what the Lord intended us to do as free people. So liberty or death. And I looked at this, it's obviously a sword, but there's a stick with a blue thing on the end. So as I researched that, I thought, I'm not so sure what it is. So my daughter's a journalist and master's degree in library science, or whatever the modern term of that is. So I said, Sharon, do some research. What is that? Well, Library of Congress, a little bit of work. She said, that's what's known as a Liberty Cap. That opened doors to discovering what a Liberty Cap was. So the Liberty Cap was basically our first symbol of freedom in the colonies. It predates most of the colonial flags, and it was on a stick. So what would happen, and this started about 1763. And 1763, this symbol became a symbol of freedom in colonial America. A newspaper article appeared in the London paper, a cartoon drawn by John Hogarth of John Wilkes. John Wilkes was a member of Parliament who was a colonial sympathizer. He was one who spoke out about, trying in absentia. We're trying the colonial Americans in British courts and they're not here to defend themselves. He spoke out against, we're taxing them unfairly because they have no representation in the House of Parliament. But he was a wild card. He was a wild card. He got thrown out of Parliament, got elected back in, got thrown out, elected back in, was imprisoned by the king for speaking out against the king. And he pointed out to the king, in our own articles, we have free speech. And the king had to release him. Well, the colonial Americans were reading this and hearing this in 1763. And this cartoon showed John Wilkes sitting in a chair with a liberty cap and a pole, and it said liberty on it. So the Sons of Liberty in Boston and Charleston would use this as a symbol. They'd walk through town like this. The British troops had no clue what this was, but it was a symbol of liberty and freedom, and also a symbol of a clandestine meeting. They would raise the hat on a flagpole, and the British troops thought, well, look at those stupid colonials. They're putting a hat on a flagpole. So it had a local meaning that the British didn't clearly appreciate, but eventually came to appreciate. The British eventually would start cutting down these liberty poles, these big, tall poles in town where they raise these hats. A question? Here. Oh, okay. You're waving, you're stretching. Okay. Okay. No question. So the liberty cap appeared on this flag. Well, as I started looking, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So the liberty cap actually predates 1763. It's called the Phrygian cap. Phrygian cap. And Phrygia was what's now where Turkey is, basically. Some geographers here. So about where Turkey is, that was Phrygia. And the Romans had a significance to this cap. And they would use this when they freed a slave. It was a symbol of freedom. And it was called Liberty Cap, or the Phrygian cap. And that was somewhere around 350 BC, or maybe even earlier, that they would free them. When I studied the ceremony, they would present the cap to the freed person, and they'd tap them and say, this is the last time you'd be beaten by your master. So the liberty cap and pole became a true symbol of freedom. So you can imagine the Sons of Liberty picked up on that. They picked up on that. Now, some of that story is an early account. Do we know if it's true? Don't know, but I've seen it repeated several times in different historical documents. They didn't have the internet, couldn't Google things back then, so there's sketchy history about that. But we do know that the Phrygian cap appears on many Roman statues, Greek statues, early statues from that area of the world. Okay, so it was our first symbol of freedom before flags. So this is the flag of New York. And I'll show you where it appears. So you will see this goddess of liberty over here, and of justice here with the scales. And this is the state coat of arms, or the state crest, the state seal. So as I started looking for, well, it's New York. And then, wow, New Jersey. So New Jersey, 1777. It's a little bit more colorful. It's like, ooh, it's the red hat with stars, you know? It's like, so they got the message that, you know, and it's, again, it's the typical seal on a blanket. It's got the crest of New Jersey, but when I see it there, I think, well, where else is it? So you start looking around, and it's not just the eastern states. Here's Idaho, the state of Idaho. Okay, so you've got the pioneer, the whatever, you got the Horn of Plenty down here, agriculture. You got the scenic beauty, and you've got the goddess of liberty holding the scales. So she's dual purposed. She's got the scales of justice, and she's also got the liberty cap and pole on the Idaho flag. So it's just like, it's on the West Virginia flag. It's on the North Carolina state seal. It's like this cap is everywhere. And does anybody ask a question about where'd that cap come from? What is it?
So these are current state flags.
These are current state flags, yeah. But again, a lot of these current state flags have the state seal or coat of arms that evolved in the 1700s or sometimes 1800s as they became states and not colonies. So this was probably the most revealing use of it. This is the United States Senate. It's hard to miss. So I called our senator, called his office and said, in their language. Y'all know what that is? And the second part of that question is, can I get one of the Senate flags? Well, that created an uproar. So the admin assistant to our senator, North Carolina senator, said, well, Robert will check. So she checked with the senator because there's one hanging in the conference room in his Senate office. And she called back and she said, well, every senator is entitled to one flag, but they have to buy it themselves. And they're like $780. Yeah. So we need a handout over here too, Tricia, right here. So, but then she said, money's not necessarily the issue, but the senator said, we need to check with the Senate Ethics Committee. And I explained, we're the only House of Flags museum in America. You know, we'd like to have a flag of the Senate to display because this is historically significant. So she met with the representatives from the Senate Ethics Committee, and they said, not no, but hell no. So then I thought, then I read the statute. There is a statute, and I think I quoted it in your handout here, that this is not to be used commercially, not to be used outside of the government, of the senator's office. It is verboten. You don't do that, you know. So as a museum, you should never ask for that, I was told. But then she said, the senator said, check with the Senate Finance Committee and see if there's some way we can work this out. I thought, well, I'm not supposed to have one, but okay. So the Senate Finance Committee said, you know, those flags are expensive. The senator's entitled to one. If the senator wants to buy one and loan it to the museum, he can do that. The senator said, not no, but hell no. Not going to spend that much money on a flag for a museum. Well, he's our district senator. It's like, come on, you know, but so I went out and had one made for $100. Yeah.
I'm gonna say, what is the quality of those flags? Are they hand embroidered as well?
No,
They just printed like this?
limited edition printed flags. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's the government $900 hammer, $700 toilet seat. Well, you know, what's really interesting about this whole thing is what you have to go through to get permission from the government. Yesterday, I showed you real government red tape. That little cotton cloth is red, that real red tape. Well, we experience government red tape in events like this. So that's why, being in the flag geek, I knew people that made flags, and we had them made. We had two of them made, one for display and one to carry on the road, because the Liberty Cap. So then they learned I had one.
Oh,
And up against the wall. So then they said, you know, this is the official seal of the Senate. The seal is only used to seal treaties. And I said, excuse me, this is a flag. This is not a seal. Yeah, but it represents the seal. Okay. I never got a cease and desist order. So we have this flag on display, and I can show this one. Just please don't report me to the federal government.
so I take it flags don't get copyrighted.
By the 1976 copyright laws, they're automatically copyrighted. By the 1976 copyright laws, they're automatically copyrighted. So anything you author, as long as you put your name and where you're from, it's considered automatic copyright. Have you registered it? No, it's not registered. So you're not afforded the same simple legal protection if it's filed in the Library of Congress, but there's an automatic copyright that goes with this. So this could be contested because of the statute about the flag and because I've violated the copyright, because it is the official seal of the Senate. But what a powerful story if I get arrested. So, honest officer, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. But this is probably one of the more interesting Liberty Cap flags. U.S. Army. So I have had so many, our board of directors is made up of admirals, generals, brigadier generals, people who served in Vietnam, Korean War. We had one World War II person on our board who's passed away, but they didn't know the story. So the coat of arms of the Army is arms and armor. Arms and armor. except this. This is an upturned sword. On the end of that upturned sword is a Liberty Cap. Above the Liberty Cap is a rattlesnake, and we'll tell the rattlesnake stories here coming up. In the rattlesnake's mouth is a banner that says, "This will defend. This will defend liberty." So when you read the story, the history about this from the Army, they explain that. They explain that, but it's lost. It's lost to civilization, lost to culture, it's lost to even Army veterans. Did you learn that, Barry, in the Army? No. So, but it's their arms and armor. Why is that? We're fighting for, so yeah, but we're fighting for liberty on an upturned sword. So it's like this. Pardon me? A woman that has no head?
I mean, you just glance at it.
Yeah.
All a dress with no head on it.
What is that? Yeah. Yeah, just don't glance at it like that. It's arms and armor, 2 flags. Yeah. 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 Pardon me?
The 3 and the 2 cannonballs, whatever on top.
That's part of your arms. You have a cannon, the butt end of a cannon here, over here, and these are cannonballs. This is a mortar here. It's a mortar and mortar balls. This is cannonballs.
Something significant about the number 5.
The number. Oh, these? There could be, but I haven't discovered that yet. I communicate with the Institute of Heraldry, and that's in the Pentagon, part of the Army. And they're in charge of all military insignia, governmental flags and stuff like that. And I have not pursued that. They're very difficult to get to respond.
Also, the year 1775, that's the year before the date on the flag, 1775. That's the year before our declaration,
Yeah.
of course, was.
Well, we took up arms against the British in 1775.
Yeah.
In April 19th, 1775.
So they produced this flag pretty quickly then.
Well, no, this flag wasn't produced. This
Okay.
flag came along almost probably a century later.
Okay. All right.
So a flag is a new creation.
Is
So
it still
what-
in use?
This is the current Army
This
flag.
is the current. one.
It's the
Okay.
current Army flag, and that's the current Army coat of arms or crest. So yeah, they did not have this flag right away. Flags in the Revolution weren't necessarily governmental flags. They were more what we'd call regimental flags or company flags. Question?
I thought about not asking you this, but on the picture, it looks like on the right, those 2 circles are almost like bombs. They have something on them.
On the Army flag?
Uh-huh. And on the flag, they're just plain.
Oh, the picture. and
Oh, the
The
crest. Okay.
picture on the handout.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So let me explain what they are.
Okay, because I'm going to think about this if I don't ask you.
Yeah. We don't want you to have sleepless nights. Be kind. Okay, so this is a spear and this is a rifle bayonet.
Mhm.
So again, arms, a spear and a rifle.
But I'm looking down at the bottom,
Okay.
on the right, the 2 circles, the 2 blue circles.
Yeah,
Okay, they're on the flag, they're 2 blue circles.
right,
But on the picture,
right,
on the handout,
right.
they look like they are armed, like
Oh, yeah, with a bomb with a fuse. Yeah.
bombs. They look like they're fused.
Okay, let me explain what flag makers do.
Oh, yay.
Flag makers take artistic license to make the designs simple and printable. So I would think that whoever made the screen for this thought, it started out as a silk screen, then it went digital. So they probably lost the little bomb fuses that were on here somewhere in that graphics transition from a commercial art silk screen to digital. Probably lost the fuses. And then like most flag makers, they didn't know it, no big deal. But the official, this is a copy of the official crest from the Army website. They have colorized versions of them too. So that would have the little fuses on there.
Well, being a detail person like I am, I noticed that then.
Well,
So hence my-
congratulations. Yeah, yeah. You get a gold star for today. So flag makers really try to oversimplify some of the flags they make. Most of the flags that I've shown you are improper proportions. Flag makers have decided in their own wisdom that flags need to be 3 feet by 5 feet, which is not a standard proportion for the flag of the United States of America. That's not a standard proportion. But flag makers say, yeah, it's 3 by 5, 4 by 6, 5 by 8 feet. Those are the standard sizes. So flag makers rule, it would appear. So have you all seen something like this in the past 15, 20 years? Yeah. So what does that signify in modern times? Where was this used in modern times?
Insurrection.
Let's go back about 15 years to the Tea Party. The Tea Party. Okay. It's been hijacked. This had nothing to do with the Tea Party. So let me explain what Christopher Gadsden's flag is all about. This is the Don't Tread on Me flag. The meeting was hijacked for political purposes. This was designed by Christopher Gadsden, who was a senator of South Carolina in 1775. He saw the design on Marine Corps drums. It was this snake in sentiment was on the Marine Corps drums. So he had a flag made for his friend. His friend was Isaac Hopkins. Isaac Hopkins was the first Commodore of what became the Navy, the US Navy. And this was his personal flag to fly on his flagship. It was kind of a treat, an honor from Christopher Gadsden to Isaac Hopkins. So it was never used in the Tea Party. The Tea Party happened well before this flag was flown on Hopkins' ship in January 1776. But historically, we hijack symbols, and you'll see that again in the Confederate flags. Symbols were hijacked and used for another purpose. Now it becomes, well, let's put it on this, And now we don't know the meaning of this because it's confusing unless you tie it to a local protest group or insurrections or the Tea Party, which protesting government spending, and it was hijacked. But where does the rattlesnake come from? So about 1754, Benjamin Franklin was the editor of his own newspaper. And on a slow news day, he would write letters to the editor. Subtle, okay? One of the letters, he commented in the text, we ought to send a boatload of rattlesnakes to England because they keep sending their convicts here. So the rattlesnake being indigenous to colonial America at the time, the British quickly learned that this is a dangerous snake. So then Paul Revere picked up on it, and on his newspaper masthead, he had the rattlesnake. During the French and Indian War, this was a cut up rattlesnake that said join or die. As colonials, join or die, or we'll be speaking French in part of Canada. So the sentiment of the rattlesnake got legs because a rattlesnake won't strike unless it's provoked. And the sentiment was King George and Parliament are provoking the colonial Americans. A rattlesnake's bite can be painful if not deadly. So by this time in this story, you can imagine Parliament and King George III laughing, yeah, we got the biggest army and navy in the world. How is this a threat to us? But then the story goes on from Franklin and Paul Revere and others of that era. They said the rattlesnake will warn you before it strikes. The rattle. Warn you before it strikes. So don't provoke us. We'll warn you before we strike. The strike can be painful if not deadly. And the rattlesnake is ever vigilant. Not having eyelids, its eyes are always open. So you think about the colonial Americans, a small percentage who were really pushing back against what they saw as the tyrannical King George III and the things that Parliament was doing with taxation. It was a natural logo to be used throughout the colonies in a number of different sources. So this is what's credited, what's called the first Navy Jack flag of the colonial or the first United States Navy. But that's not necessarily true. It was really the flag of South Carolina's Navy, and it had blue stripes. But somehow, after Ben Franklin responded to a question about what flag has the running rattlesnake, he quoted it as the flag of the South Carolina Navy. Somehow it got transitioned to the flag of the Navy. And that stuff happens. I mean, the media coverage wasn't as good as it is today. Not saying today's media coverage is really good, but you know, but it's different times. And there's a lot of misinterpretations in flags that we've seen, flags with red, white, and blue stripes. So how did that happen? Well, just you didn't pay attention in school. So rattlesnakes, the rattlesnake flags there are about 8 significant rattlesnake flags during the Revolutionary War, and we have them all hanging in the museum. And they tell a story about what's important to different groups in that time. Most of those rattlesnake flags were militia flags. This one, the yellow one here, Isaac Hopkins, was just a personal gift. It wasn't a military flag, it was a personal flag of Isaac Hopkins. So most were not official military flags, they were local flags. This is a local rattlesnake flag, which I discovered the description of this flag in a book written in, first edition was 1872, republished in 1880 something, then again in 1912 by Admiral George Henry Preble. And he described the first 2 flags of North Carolina. And I'll show you the first one here. This one was described as the Bladen and Brunswick County flag. Now, these are coastal counties. It dates to about 1780, 1779. So the pine tree is significant in New England as ever-living evergreen. And that migrated down to Bladen and Brunswick County, North Carolina as the same symbol, ever-living evergreen. And then the rattlesnake, he said, was called at the base of the tree. So we had an artist draw it up and had the flag made to hang in our museum to say this was one of the first flags in North Carolina that talked about liberty and the rattlesnake. Interesting juxtaposition of a snake in a pine tree, but that's what we see down there. So we're going to transition from snakes to hornets. So this was in Admiral Henry Preble's book described as the first unofficial flag of North Carolina. It's known as the Hornet's Nest flag. Now, yesterday we talked about the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence that's on the North Carolina flag. May 20th, 1775 is the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. That was almost a year before the colonial declaration. But the story behind this is so fascinating because when you look at the Revolutionary War, Charleston was the most prolific port in the colonies. Charleston shipped and received more goods than any other port on the seacoast. The British tried initially to capture Charleston. They finally got it in 1780. War started 1775, 1776. So it took them a long time to get into Charleston because of the protection with the fort on Sullivan Island, Fort Sumter on Sullivan Island, the other forts along where Fort Moultrie on Sullivan Island, excuse me, as well as the fortifications in Charleston Harbor. So then when the British General Cornwallis finally captured Charleston, they marched up through Camden, South Carolina, up toward Charlotte, North Carolina, because Charlotte was seen as, if we can capture Charlotte and Charleston, we've pretty much got the southeastern under British control, southeastern US. So the British troops marched up to Mecklenburg County, Charlotte, at that time it's called Charlottetown or Charlottesville, and they were driven out by local militia. And I liken the local militia to Jack Russell Terrier. This little yippy dog is going to get them. So local militia drove the British troops and General Cornwallis out of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County. Cornwallis wrote back to England and said, we've tried, but we have not been able to hold Charlotte or Mecklenburg County because it is a hornet's nest of rebellion. You ever heard of the Charlotte Hornets basketball team? So when you see the Charlotte police cars, they got a hornet's nest on the police cars. The Girl Scout Boy Scout Council is the Hornet's Nest Council of the Scouts. So Charlotte is the Hornet's Nest city based on General Cornwallis, who tried to capture the town, but couldn't. It's a hornet's nest of rebellion. And that has stuck since 1780 in our state. So that's the hornet's nest. When you read the history, they have public events where they would literally raise a hornet's nest on the flagpole. Brave souls that they were. They would use a hornet's nest like the New Englanders would use a rattlesnake. So you don't want to poke a hornet's nest, do you? I mean, it's a similar sentiment. So when Cornwallis cemented that phrase in their hornet's nest of rebellion, it stuck. It stuck. Okay. I have to look at my cheat sheet to capture a name of a person as part of this story. Of all the flags in the Revolution, this is my #1 favorite. We've had this flag reproduced for our museum, and we've had it reproduced to carry on the road to tell a story. It is a very non-traditional flag because of its shape. It is a square flag, about 4 feet by 4 feet. But notice the detail. You can see the detail in your drawings as well as up here. I love the graphic design of it. 13 stars around this coil-up rattlesnake, what we call a fouled anchor, 2 cannons. This is the United Train of Artillery of Providence, Rhode Island. United Train of Artillery, cannons, fusiliers. They are in charge of cannons and mortars. Historically, France loaned 2 cannons to the Patriots during the Revolution. One of those cannons still exists. They had cast bronze barrels. One still exists. So this was very significant for the United Train of Artillery of Providence, Rhode Island. But something else is different. It says, do not tread on me. It's like your mama says, do not go out after dinner, you know. So it's emphatic. All the other rattlesnake flags are the contraction, don't tread on me. This is do not tread on me. The other part is in God we hope. This dates to 1774, 75, 76 era, well before we used in God we trust as our motto on coinage and currency. In God we hope. So this deserves some study. So in studying this flag, it's gradually becoming my real favorite flag more and more as I dig into it. So think about Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a small state. See what happens when flag makers? This is the correct size. But when I made the flag, I made it for the 3x5 flags that flag makers make. So this was a custom made flag, actual size. It is still the flag of the United Train of Artillery. They are still an active unit. They were active during the Civil War II and active during World War I and II. So Rhode Island, the history of Rhode Island dates back to Roger Williams. Roger Williams spoke out against the Church of England, the Anglican Church, the Church of State in Massachusetts in the 1630s. Eventually, he was told he was run out of Massachusetts, said, come back here, we could hang you for blaspheming the Church of England. So he went down to what became Rhode Island and negotiated with the Narragansett Indians for a piece of land. And he called that piece of land Providence Plantations, which later became Providence, Rhode Island, but Providence Plantations. And what Roger Williams did is he made that sort of the religious freedom colony. He said, if you're in the colonial America, if you're Catholic, chances are you had to live in Maryland because, Lord Calvert in Maryland was a staunch Roman Catholic, and that's where the Catholics live. So Roger Williams was upset about you can't speak against the Church of England. You can still believe in God, but you got to believe in the Church of England equally. Well, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this. So Roger Williams founded the Providence Plantations about 1636. When he founded Providence Plantations, he founded it based on a scriptural reference. Hebrews 6:19. Y'all familiar with Hope College?
Yes.
Your founder's statement?
Yes, it is.
So when you look at this is based on Hebrews 6:19. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. The anchor has nothing to do with sailing, ships, or Rhode Island being a maritime colony. It is a spiritual anchor, scriptural anchor to Hebrews 6:19. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure, which explains in God we hope on the flag. Roger Williams went on to found the Baptist Church in America. The Paul Harvey part of this, the rest of the story is, and let me just show you the Rhode Island Regiment flag. So the Rhode Island Regiment helps me tell the Paul Harvey piece because it has the anchor, the fouled anchor, and hope. Okay, we call that a fouled anchor because the rope is fouled on the anchor, which is a naval reference. So when we look at the current Rhode Island flag, the current Rhode Island flag has the anchor unfouled, because somebody probably said, why do we have a rope wrapped around the anchor? I don't know. Has 13 stars, and it has hope. So, okay, now Paul Harvey would look at that and say, the rest of the story is Rhode Island is the smallest state, geographically the smallest state, with the longest name. The official name of the state of Rhode Island is Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. Look it up. Rhode Island's long enough, but Rhode Island and Providence Plantations. About 2007, they had a referendum on the ballot to try to get rid of that plantation bit because it's seen as Southern slavery. But when you go back and unwind that to Roger Williams and Providence Plantations, sorry about that, I'll boom back, David. When you unwind that, it had nothing to do with Southern plantations and slavery, had everything to do with religious freedom. Oh, y'all come. Rhode Island and Providence Plantation, the official name of the state of Rhode Island. Smallest state, longest name, shortest motto. The state motto of Rhode Island is one word: hope. So believe it or not, you're connected to Rhode Island.
Don't tell the Dutch.
No, but they may have sailed into ports in Rhode Island and migrated west, and eventually ended up here. So we don't know. But anyway, yeah. So what enabled me to tell that was this most beautiful flag from the Revolution. So it's so interesting talking to school kids coming through and adults, because I can share scripture with them. So when you go back in time in the 1770s, people were Bible-believing, God-fearing Christians in colonial America. The flag tells that story, as well as the struggle with the cannons. So have any of you heard that story before about Rhode Island and the longest name? So anyway, the referendum didn't pass because the uninformed voters were overruled at the polls, and Rhode Island still has the longest name, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, which I think is kind of cool.
Question, the don't tell me, who's that attributed to?
The sentiment, I don't know. Who can we attribute "Don't Tread on Me" to?
Yeah.
So the rattlesnake I can attribute to Ben Franklin, and Paul Revere added fuel to that with his masthead on his newspaper. Where the "Don't Tread on Me" came in, I've not been able to pinpoint that. not been able to pinpoint who was first quoted at that. A lot of what I know about the flags comes from notes, letters. Flag historians look at personal letters back home when they're off to war. In that era of the Revolution, there was so much chaos going on, we don't know. At least I don't know, haven't been able to find that yet. If any of you find out who we can attribute that quote to, with 3 sources to verify it, let me know. I can make up something. Okay. This flag is not in your handout, and I've got to show it to explain something about how flags are somehow misrepresented. Notice how this is longer. So this flag was handmade in proportion to what we call the Bennington flag. The Bennington flag at first was attributed to the Revolutionary War, Bennington, Vermont. The 76 harkens back to 1776, the Declaration of Independence, and the 13 stars. The stars are 7-pointed stars. So again, when you look at colonial American flags, Revolutionary War flags, there were no star rules. They're called a mullet. And the mullet can have many points or a few points, but more than 4. So we have 5, 6, 7, 8-pointed stars in our historical flags. This is the only one that I've seen that has a 7-pointed star. So it was first attributed to a battle flag from the Battle of Bennington, Vermont, and then later on historians and forensic textilists, what would you call them? Anybody, textile person, which they're neat people. They can analyze threads and thread count and stitches and makeup. They said, the threads in the original flag date after the Revolutionary War. So more than likely, this was a flag during the War of 1812 that was carried into battle by a group, whether that's a battalion or a company or a militia from the Vermont area, New England area, they call it New England area, carried in battle in War of 1812, as near as we can tell. Also notice how it starts with a white stripe and ends with a white stripe. So they purposely didn't want it to look like the flag of the United States, but they have 13 stripes. So Vermont has an interesting history, sort of a sidelight here, before I segue into the Civil War. Vermont's first flag looked like the flag of the United States of America. It was red and white stripes and stars. But they printed state of Vermont on the flag so it wouldn't be confused with the US flag. Well, wait a minute. It's stars and stripes. It's red, white, and blue. If it's on a pole, it looks like the flag of the United States. So in 1795, they looked at that flag and said, yeah, it's a little bit too close to the flag of the United States. We'll change it to a different state flag. So they put a seal on a blanket, the state seal. So flags sort of evolved, like designed by a committee, and bizarre things happen. I'm going to segue into the Civil War, but are any questions on the Revolutionary War era flags? It's probably the most interesting because of the stories they tell. Any questions? Okay, Civil War. War between the states. Let me get that flag is not in the handout. So war broke out between the states. Shots were fired on Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. That really sealed its war. It was building for almost a decade with trade restrictions, commercial restrictions, all sorts of things. But the first flag of the Confederacy, which is called the Stars and Bars, was a seven stars, because 7 states that seceded the Union and became the first states of the Confederacy. But when a state seceded, they were known as the Republic of Florida, the Republic of South Carolina, the Republic of North Carolina, until they officially joined the Confederate States of America. So during secession, you had these standalone sovereign states popping up with only their local state government. So the CSA, Confederate States of America, evolved from 7 to 9 to 11 And then they adopted Missouri and Kentucky because Missouri and Kentucky were border states. They gave them 13. Missouri and Kentucky had representatives both in the federal government and in the Confederate government. They adopted those two because when you read the notes of the Flag Committee of the Confederacy, they wanted red, white, and blue. They wanted red and white stripes. They wanted stars in a blue field because they were going to win the war. And they didn't want to have such a dramatic change from the United States flag to the flag of the Confederacy. They wanted to preserve that red, white, and blue. That later on would get them in trouble. At the First Battle of Manassas, the Yankees called Bull Run, General Beauregard almost fired on his own troops because his troops were flying this flag. Now imagine this flag in a battlefield with cannon smoke and gunshots and chaos of battle. How do you know, looking through the telescope or binoculars, if that's a Confederate flag or a federal flag? How do you know? And that's the trouble. You know, when I display flags like this, that's atypical to how you would display a flag in battle. It's on a pole and it's being carried. That gives the general who's calling the order the ability to see where my troops are. He almost fired on his own troops. After that battle, General Beauregard's aide was William Porcher Miles. Now, William Porcher Miles was the head of the committee that designed the first Confederate flag. And William Porcher Miles did not want this as a Confederate flag for that very reason, but he's overruled by the members of his committee. So after that battle, William Porcher Miles and General Beauregard got together and spoke to General Johnston, and they designed this flag. This is the second flag of the Confederate States of America. So this is what William Porcher Miles wanted as the Confederate flag to begin with. So they evolved from the stars and bars to this. And for the majority of the Civil War, this was the official flag of the Confederate States of America. So this would have been flown at forts, at posts, at military posts, and military installations, carried into large battle by large companies or battalions. But the challenge with this flag, and we'll talk about this part of it in a little bit. The challenge of this flag is it kind of looks like too much of a flag of surrender. Oh, it's hard to win a war. So in the waning months of the war between the states, in the waning months, they adopted this as the first flag of the Confederate States of America. So this is called the Bloodstained Banner. And I think what happened was after the war, they named the flag the Bloodstained Banner. This one was referred to during its use contemporaneously as the Stainless Banner. The Stainless Banner. The first one is referred to as the Stars and Bars. If you were, well, I'm going to skip that one for a minute. So when you look at the flags of the Confederacy, so often this is spoken of as a Confederate flag. It never was a flag of the Confederate States of America. This is the battle flag of the Army of the Potomac or the Army of Northern Virginia, as its name changed. Most of the troops in the southeastern United States, the colonials, the Confederate States of America, fought under this flag. This was the battle flag of the Army of Northern Virginia, which fought battles all the way through Georgia and Georgia. So they had three versions. They had an artillery, cavalry, and an infantry version of this, three different sizes. But it's a battle flag. It was never a flag of the Confederacy, never referred to as the Confederate flag in its era. These were the Confederate flags. So keep that in mind. Notice how that fits. Thank you, flag makers. So when they changed to the second flag of the Confederacy, which is this one, remember yesterday, and for those of you new, this is called the Union of the Flag. So when this portion of the flag is flown on a naval ship on the jack staff, it's called the Navy Jack flag, the naval flag. So that flag was used in the Confederate Navy as their Navy Jack. They had a square version and a rectangular version. So this was also the flag of the Army of Tennessee. So the Army of Tennessee, which fought in Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky, this was their battle flag. Was never a flag of the Confederate States of America. Now, Leonidas Polk was a Confederate general. So Leonidas Polk graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point with Grant and Lee. And when Leonidas Polk got his commission, he resigned it immediately, became a bishop in the Episcopal Church. So Leonidas Polk was sent down to Louisiana, and he was the Episcopal bishop out of Louisiana, New Orleans, and Baton Rouge. Well, during the Civil War, he was recruited by the Confederacy to be the general of the Army of Tennessee, because his family owned lots of land in Western North Carolina and lots of land in Tennessee. They knew the people, they knew the lay of the land. Leonidas Polk.
Question.
Yes.
Right here. How was it determined who would carry the flag into battle? And was it a really distinctive honor to do that, or was it given to the lowest person on the totem pole?
Yeah. You're going to run out there in front of all of us. You're the target because you got a banner. I can't answer. I don't know. You know, if I was a military historian, I'd have an immediate answer for that. So now I'll just make something up. No, I don't know. I really don't know how they choose that. And how do they choose the drummers and the buglers? I mean, they're announcing their presence where they are. So they're immediate targets. I don't know. Pardon me?
They tend to be awful young.
Yeah, the drummers were 10, 12 years old. So, and they were expendable, but they were sending messages. I mean, they used the drums and the bugles, the special cadences for different messages. The different bugle from when it's time to get up, when it's time to go to bed, when it's time to grab your weapons, whatever. There was bugle calls and drum calls for all that. So they had to be talented 10-year-olds. So Leonidas Polk, and the reason I segued in Leonidas Polk, the Army of East Tennessee, was because he got one of his General Bragg to invade Columbus, Kentucky, to bring Kentucky into the Civil War. So they went over the Tennessee line up into Kentucky, and being from Columbus, North Carolina, I thought that's interesting because they attacked Columbus, Kentucky, one of 23 Columbuses in America. But that was named after Christopher. We're named after Dr. Columbus Mills. Okay, so see, flags let me tell all kinds of stories. So the Confederate battle flag was used for military purposes. So people in homes and farms and in communities would use the Bonnie Blue flag. Now the Bonnie Blue flag, which is part of the North Carolina flag today, and part of other state flags, it's the part of the Texas flag too. The Bonnie Blue flag dates back to 1810, and it's the West Florida Dragoons, the West Florida Cavalry. This was the symbol of the West Florida Republic. So when the West Florida Dragoons captured the Spanish fort in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, they raised the Bonnie Blue flag. So in 1810, this became a symbol of a new republic. So it only makes sense that the Confederate sympathizers, not having access to these kind of flags, would tend to fly the Bonnie Blue flag as a symbol of a new republic, a new sovereignty. So the Bonnie Blue flag was made famous twice in our history. Most memorable during the Civil War is the Bonnie Blue flag. Very simple flag, but it spoke volumes when you see that as a symbol of a new republic. So other groups, other battalions, companies would come up with variations of the flag. Now, a lot of the flags were made by Confederate flag makers in Richmond, in Mobile, Alabama, and New Orleans, but some flags were made at home. This flag is called a blockade runner's flag. Now, the blockade runners were running stuff through the federal naval blockades into ports such as New Orleans. Once you get in New Orleans, you got the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, you can really get up into Yankee land. But there was Port Hudson, Louisiana, is a point on the Mississippi River where there's a major battle. It was a blockade that prevented the Confederates from going up to the Ohio River. So this is referred to as the Port Hudson flag, even though it was a blockade runner flag, because it was captured at the Battle of Port Hudson, Louisiana. So we don't know how it got there, other than maybe somebody was on a blockade runner ship, purloined the flag, took it off to battle, and ended up being captured. But you can see it's different. The Blue Union doesn't go all the way down. It's a bit different than the Confederate flag. It's still the stars and bars. And they changed colors of it. So it's sort of, flags could be anything they wanted them to be if it wasn't an official government flag. So often these flags are all referred to as Confederate flags. And do y'all remember the killings in Charleston where Dylan Roof shot the church members during a prayer meeting? Yeah. So in the background of one of the photographs was a small version of this flag. And the media, they're not vexillologists. The media did not understand that this was not a Confederate flag, but they referred to it as the Confederate flag. So to a vexillologist, it's like, ooh, no, it's not the Confederate flag. They also refer to it as the stars and bars because it's got stars and it's got bars. Well, not really. The stars and bars look totally different than that. It's back here somewhere. So the stars and bars, which you saw earlier, is back here. The Southerners never referred to this as the stars and bars. So the media reporting on this were basically non-historians. They understood what they were saying and referred to stars and bars. Well, my daughter's friend was writing a book on that event at the AME church in Charleston, on the event and the aftermath of the event, the donations that were made to the bishop that never made it to the church, all the political wrangling that went on with that whole thing with Dylan Roof's trial and all that stuff. So in her book, when my daughter was reading the manuscript, the author kept referring to this as the Confederate flag behind Dylan Roof. And I said, no, it's not. My daughter said, why don't you have my dad edit your book and make sure that whenever you refer to the Confederate flag, it is the Confederate flag. Because at that same time, there was a big brouhaha in Columbia, South Carolina, about the Confederate flag flying at the state capitol. Well, it was the battle flag, but people referred to it colloquially as the Confederate flag. So she was using references to the state capitol flag in Columbia, as well as the Dylan Roof flag, as well as trying to put it in historical perspective. So talking about 2 or 3 different flags in this book. So I got a chance to edit the manuscript and help her determine which flag you're referring to here. And let's call it by its correct name, which was interesting to read the story about that whole thing. But how a flag can be misrepresented and hijacked. So since that, a lot of the sentiments in the Southeast tie this to the killings at the AME church in Charleston. So something else happened in history with that flag. During the 1948 presidential buildup, Senator Strom Thurmond from South Carolina was nominated as the Dixiecrat candidate for president in Birmingham, Alabama in 1948. Strom Thurmond was known to be a segregationist, keep people in their place. The press photo is so interesting because it's taken kind of from the stage, looking out at part of the crowd, looking at Strom Thurmond and people up on the stage. In the background, University of Mississippi are waving this flag. Because that's what they do. That's what's part of the Mississippi flag. It was what they used at football games. University of Mississippi students use this as their banner. Like, yay. Well, from that photograph and that presidential nomination in 1948, that flag got associated with segregation and the Dixiecrats, not with a historical battle flag. So it was hijacked. Dylan Roof, AME Church, was hijacked well before that in 1948 with Strom Thurmond as the Dixiecrat candidate for president. So flags are symbols. Flags get hijacked for different purposes and different reasons. So I was talking to Tricia, my sister-in-law, on the way in here. So often in history, when we look back at history, we look at it from our perspective today. What does that mean to us today in our context? And yet when you go back at that moment, if you could live in that moment, you realize that it had nothing to do with what we see it as today. So Strom Thurmond was not waving that flag. Dylan Roof was not waving that flag. He just happened to be in a photograph. And whether it's press, media in 1948 or social media and whenever that happened, it tends to get legs and rewrite history. And that has happened so much with the flag of the Confederacy, unless you live there. When you live there, it's an interesting discussion. So the Sons of Confederate Veterans in our county have kind of adopted me as their favorite Yankee. So at one of their meetings, I taught us this session on the flags of the Confederate States of America and the battle flags. I taught a session on that. So then after that, I heard them, wow, look at this. This is interesting. This guy knows more about our flags than we do. So they put out in their newsletter to the Sons of Confederate Veterans throughout the Southeast that get a hold of Robert Williamson at the House of Flags Museum because this Yankee knows more about our flags than we do. So it's interesting, even within the geography of the South, they don't necessarily understand what it is because it's been hijacked over time. And when you study history, you see what it was really meant to be in that time, in that era, which creates some interesting discussions if they're open-minded, because they say, oh, I didn't know that. Where did you find that? They say, here's our library, go look it up. Here's the books to look at. Here's the letters, here's the diaries, here's where you can learn more about that. So it's actually encouraged people to delve into history more. Again, I learned more about history talking and teaching about flags than I learned when I was in school, because it comes to life. Okay, Port Hudson. I'm coming back. I'm coming back. I'm driving David nuts back there in the home audience. I'm sorry. So this is General Lee's headquarter flags. So it looks like the stars and bars, but look at the star pattern. The star pattern's a different shape. This was made by the design. It was designed by General Lee's wife to protect him in his personal headquarters. She refers to this pattern as the bread of life or the Ark of the Covenant design. Notice the shape. So she designed this flag for her husband to be his protecting flag. So quite often, higher level military commanders have their own flags, their headquarters flags, their personal flags that have a meaning to them or their family. And they're not necessarily an official flag of the Army in this case, the Army of the South. But that's General Lee's personal headquarter flag. I'm coming back. The North Carolina secession flag is a similar design to what our flag is today, but the colors are different and the dates are different. So we've got what became a Bonnie blue flag on our flag today with the blue background, white star was red. The blue and white stripes became red and white stripes in our current flag. But two dates, May 20th, 1775, the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence, which is on our state flag. But down here, May 20th, 1861, the date of secession, the date that the North Carolina legislature signed the Articles of Secession from the United States government. May 20th. I envision the legislators sitting around a smoke-filled room on May 19th. We're going to sign that thing. Bring it over here. We're going to sign it. No, we have to wait until May 20th. May 20th is important in our state's history because of the Mecklenburg Declaration of Independence. And we're about to declare ourselves separate and aside from the United States of America. 2 secession dates on the North Carolina Republic flag. So it's called our secession flag or the North Carolina Republic flag, because when we seceded from the Union, we became the Republic of North Carolina until the state joined the Confederate States of America. If you notice the picture in your handout of that flag, notice the star. Look closely at that star. It's tipped. It's tipped. It's like somebody didn't get that star quite right. There's a reason for that. And the reason goes like this. If you fly a flag upside down, what does that mean? Distress. Yeah, distress. Same thing. If I have a device on a flag and I reverse it or tip it out of its ordinary, it's a symbol of distress. There's several flags in the Civil War era. The Palmetto Guard was the group that took over Fort Sumter and Charleston Harbor. They have a palmetto tree and they have a red star, and the red star is tipped about 25 degrees. Not quite right. You know, it's a subtle symbol of distress when you have a device that's not quite right. So I'm coming back, David. Driving nuts, sorry. Get the right one. So this is the secession flag of South Carolina. Notice how this crescent shape is facing the star. Okay, hold that thought. Because the state of South Carolina flag looks like this. So the crescent is facing up direction of travel. On the secession flag, it's like the artist screwed up. No, he didn't. They reversed it, a symbol of distress with that crescent facing the wrong way. It's also a swallowtail cavalry guidon shape is what that is. That's a cavalry guidon shape. This was not an official flag. It didn't fly very long, but when South Carolina seceded and it hit the newspapers, this flag popped up downtown in the Treasury building or one of the port buildings as this is our flag of secession. So we see that in a number of them. So this is South Carolina's current flag, and a lot of discussion about this. The symbolism here is not obvious unless you lived in this era, because a lot of South Carolinians don't know this about their flag. I'm running out of peg space. Barry, I should have made that longer. Yep. There we go. Okay. So the significance of this goes back to Fort Moultrie, the fort on Sullivan's Island. If you've ever been there, you can see some of the history of the Battle of Charleston during the Revolutionary War. But Colonel Moultrie, who defended his local militia, defended the fort on Sullivan's Island, they wore blue uniforms and they had a symbol on their hats, which was this crescent. It's not a moon. It was a symbol on their hats. And basically, if you think about it as something with horns, the horns pointed up. It's called a gorget or gorget, G-O-R-G-E-T. And it's a badge like I'm on duty, I'm a sheriff badge, here's my badge. So it was a badge of being on duty, on commission. During the French and Indian War, there were portraits of George Washington, and he had one around his neck, had the badge around his neck. They were used as trading pieces with the Native Americans. The government would produce them and trade them because the Native Americans wore breastplates and things. So this gorget or gorget came from knights of armor, and it protected their throat. It was a protection around here. The early Marine Corps had leather gorgets or gorgets. That's why we call the Marines leathernecks. because they had that leather guard around there. That's not a flag trivia, but yeah. So the palmetto tree was important to South Carolina because the fort on Sullivan's Island was made out of palmetto logs. Now, palmetto log isn't like a oak tree. It's not like a palm tree. It's a spongy weed. It's like a yucca plant that gets about this big around and 20 feet tall, but it's all fibrous. And when the British would bombard the fort on Sullivan's Island, which we know is Fort Moultrie today, the cannonballs would either bounce off or sink in. It wouldn't destroy a hardwood fort, a fort made out of oak logs. It's like the British were saying, what is this fort made out of? So part of the defense of Charleston Harbor during the Revolutionary War was attributed to the palmetto logs that were used to construct Fort Moultrie. So the badges on their hats were little silver medallions that was this gorget or gorget shape, a little silver medallion. So the story goes from Colonel Moultrie, I made the flag of the blue of their uniforms and the symbol from their hats. Okay, most people call that symbol a moon, a crescent moon. There's nothing that in heraldry that indicates we have reverence for a crescent moon. In Islam, there's Islamic references. The Turkish flag has the crescent moon on it. It's a symbol of a second sun in Far East heraldry. But in our culture, the moon isn't necessarily part of our heraldry or our symbols. So people in South Carolina and all over refer to that as the crescent moon. So there's been a movement afoot in South Carolina to turn it points up, because somewhere along the way, a graphic artist said, you know, it really should be like this. You know, they said in their ignorance, it's a moon, and moons don't look like this. They look like this. So let's stylize it. And that's what happened to the South Carolina flag. There's a movement afoot to redesign and reapprove the flag with the points up, meeting with huge resistance, because habitually for 8 generations, that's been their flag. That's been their flag. Don't change our flag. You know. So they had a committee recently change the flag. They changed the palmetto tree. They stylized it. They gave it different branches. And this is a cheap knockoff. When you look at the official one, I mean, every branch, every leaf, everything is just like perfect. They redesigned the leaves of the palmetto tree. They left that alone. Public pressure. Don't change our flag. So that's that story. So have I missed anything in the Civil War? No, that's probably it. Okay, great. Any questions on the Civil War flags? Flag of the Confederacy. Okay, I left you hanging yesterday with some comments on the Utah flag and others. Oops. So a few more flag mysteries, and this is a bonus. No extra charge for this. So I'm going to start out with Georgia, and I didn't introduce this yesterday, but when I talked about the North American Vexillological Association, the Georgia flag in 2001 to 3 was voted as the worst design, ugliest flag in all of North America. But that's not this flag. That's this flag. So why did they feel an urge to redesign their flag into the worst design flag of all of Canada and America and the United States? Well, let me go back. In the 1996 Olympics, this flag flew over Georgia. This flag flew during the Olympics because they were held in Atlanta, Georgia. The international media had a heyday with this racist flag. But it was their flag from 1956 to 2001. It caught significant backlash. So in its history, nothing new. Georgia has had 8 flags in their history, which is atypical for most states. They've had 8 flags. This was flag number 6. This was the 6th flag. So they commissioned a local artist, and Robert Wages, to design a flag that looked like this. However, When Robert Wages designed this flag, David, I'm going to segue over here. He designed it with not these flags, but he had the 6 flags of Georgia. What he had down here was the British flag, the French flag, the Revolutionary War flag, the Confederate flag, and then the US flag. He had historical flags across there. The Senate committee in Georgia, legislature got together and said, nah, we want these flags of Georgia because these are important to us, legislators. The Betsy Ross flag, well, you know the Betsy Ross story. The first and second flag of Georgia, and the most racist flag of Georgia with the battle flag. They wanted that there, then they wanted, oh yeah, we'll include the flag of the United States in there. Now envision this on a flagpole. Then they said, we need to have God, in God we trust somewhere in there. Let's put it down there as a footnote. Terrible design. Not even from a vexillologist perspective, but just, it's a terrible design. When it's on a flagpole, you don't have a clue what it is. From a distance, even like that, you don't know what those little things are. And can you really read in God we trust? Gold on a blue banner? So in 2003, Governor Sonny Perdue said, we need to answer this. We need to take care of this. So they designed a new flag. It has the Georgia seal up there. That's the same Georgia seal that was on all the other flags. But what is interesting about this flag is the first flag of the Confederate States of America, the stars and bars. They put their seal in the middle of the 13 stars of the first flag of the Confederate States of America, and nobody knows that as the Confederate flag. They think that's the Confederate flag. It's the battle flag. So when they specified the next flag, it's slow. Okay. The notes that came from the legislature said the flag of the state of Georgia shall be the first flag of the Confederacy with the seal inside the circle of 13 stars. They weren't trying to hide it. They knew that most people would not know that as the Confederate flag. Yeehaw, they won. It's a better looking one. Absolutely. Pardon me? So again, if you live there, it's part of their heritage. It's part of something that their culture lived through, their society lived through, and they're not ready to just flush it and come up with something totally new. So that's the Georgia flag. That's the current flag of Georgia. It is the Confederate flag. That's another Paul Harvey moment. Yeah.
Doesn't it have more stars?
Oh, it has the 13 stars.
Yeah, but then the Confederate flag only has 7.
Well, the Confederate flag had 7 stars, 9 stars, 11 stars, and eventually 13. So the third iteration of stars and bars ended up with 13. So again, the Confederacy didn't come up with one flag and stick with it. They said, we got to keep adding stars. They wanted to get to 13 because they were going to win the war and they wanted to preserve 13 stars, 13 stripes, and all that stuff. So yeah. So the latest first Confederate flag looked like that, and they just plunked their seal right in the middle of the circle. I think that's an awesome story. Paul Harvey moment. Okay, this is Utah. So this flag was designed in 1922 for the USS Utah christening as a battleship, as a military ship. So the governor apparently got a committee and a group of artists to do this flag. Well, when you look at this flag, what looks wrong to you? What doesn't look quite right? The numbers. So 1847 is the date of the Utah Territory. 1896 is when they became the state of Utah. 2 important dates in their history, but somebody blotted over 1847 with that crest. So at the christening of the USS Utah, the press thought, wow, that's the Utah flag. Poof, take pictures, reproduce it. So from 1922 to 2011, yesterday says 85 years, it's about 89 years. That was the state flag. So in 2011, after 10 years of fighting with the legislature, 2 local vexillologists finally got this flag changed to that flag. And as I mentioned yesterday, the flag that I saw in the Mormon Museum was a handmade version that looked like that. So somehow whoever made that flag in 1922 did not look at what the flag really looked like. Or they made the applique of the shield separately and stuck it on there and forgot to measure and came up with that. But that's what it was supposed to be. Utah 1847, the territory date with 1896 down there. So for 89 years, they had a mistaken state flag. So when they came up with a new flag, people said, oh, we don't like the flag. It's not right. The shield should be blue. And all they were going back to, we've seen our wrong flags for so many years. We think it's right. So anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. So we've covered a lot of fun with flags in 2 days. And for some of you, it's just been 1 day. There's so many stories about flags and so many more stories I could tell. And what I really enjoy are sessions like this to share history of flags, fun with flags, and tours through our museum. We can take longer in the museum. Some tours start out to be 20 minutes, but after questions and so on, they turn into 2 hours. So we have fun with flags in our museum. Question?
Earlier, you talked about fouled anchors. What's the significance of the anchor being fouled?
What is the significance of the anchor being fouled on the Rhode Island flags?
Flag or the Navy flag?
Yeah. So one of our board members was a retired admiral, and he basically attributed that to that's a naval symbol. It's a naval symbol of the fouled anchor, and why it's fouled, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. There's got to be a story there, but again, if I was a military historian, I could probably tell you that. So what happens in studying flags is a question like that is going to prompt me to find out what that is, which means I'm not going to go look at flag history. I've got to go back and look at military history to see when that evolved as a naval symbol.
Robert, on the Utah flag, what's the honeycomb or beehive?
The beehive?
Yeah, what's it?
So
and the flowers.
The state of Oregon has a two-sided flag, and the backside of the state of Oregon is a beaver. Busy is a beaver, industrious beaver. It's the same thing with the beehive. Busy is a bee. It's a symbol of industry. It's a symbol of prosperity, of building things.
It's called the Beehive State as well, isn't it?
Yeah, the beehive state. But again, a lot of that comes from their symbol. The names come from their symbol, like the North Carolina Hornets. It comes from a symbol. Yes.
I'm just curious, on the front of your building, you had 3 flags. Obviously, one was the US.
Yeah.
What other 2 flags are on your building, in front of your building?
The one on the left is the Hornet's Nest flag. The one on the right is the state of North Carolina flag. So when you display the official flag of the United States of America, it has to be the taller the poles. If it's a series of poles, it has to be on its right. So if I had a series of poles this way, the US flag would be here and the states and others would be over here. It's the flag's right. But when you have 3 like that, the middle flag is the tall one, we call it the American flag. But yeah, the Hornet's Nest flag. So this flagpole, we tend to fly other flags of significance at different times of the year. When I have guests there from Finland, I fly the Finnish flag, the Dutch flag, the Ukrainian flag is up there now, flying on that pole. So that's sort of our flexible pole.
So we got a question from Zoom and then maybe time for one more question after that. If a US territory becomes a state in the future, any projection as to where the 51st star will be placed on the flag?
Interesting question. So as I worked with the vexillologist and also with the Institute of Heraldry and going through boxes of flag designs that people submitted during Eisenhower for Alaska and Hawaii, the Institute of Heraldry said, we're not going through that again. So they have designed up to 56 stars on our flags, 56 to cover the territories. And they're all parallel rows. On some of them, they had to change the sizes of the stars. to preserve the space, but also the proportions are still according to the executive order that specifies the flag. But we have designs up to 56 stars because they don't want to go through that. Again, boxes of kindergarten drawings, boxes of architects, engineers, boxes from committees, and thousands of flags were submitted in 1950, before 1959 Alaska statehood, thousands. And they're all in the archives. You can go see them. Check out the box and look at it. Any other questions? Well, I want to thank HASP. I want to thank the city of Holland and my brother and sister-in-law for inviting us here. And I really enjoyed the discussion with you folks. Thank you.
We want to hear.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
We would love to thank you as well for really a marvelous presentation on something I never thought I would be interested in. This is really, I mean, it's really great. It's wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.